There's a sentence you've probably heard 100 times. Failure is the best teacher. And there's a version of that sentence that's completely true. And there's another version of it that is, if I'm being honest, one of the most comfortable lies that successful people tell themselves on the way to selling you a course. Because here's the part they leave out. Failure is only a teacher if you can afford to stay in the classroom. And not everyone can. That's the conversation nobody wants to have. Because it's easier to say embrace failure than to say failure has a cost. And depending on where you're standing, that cost might be everything. So today I want to talk about failure honestly, not the motivational poster version, the real version. And I want to do it through one specific story, because I think one honest story does more than 100 philosophical arguments. This is the story of a man who had absolutely no business succeeding, who had no safety net, no meaningful leverage, no obvious way in, no plan B that didn't feel like a slow death, who couldn't afford to fail in the most literal, practical sense of that phrase, and what he chose to do anyway, and what it cost him, and what it eventually became. New York City. A 29-year-old man is sitting in a one-bedroom apartment he can barely afford, with no heat, and a wife who is running out of patience and exactly $106 in his bank account. He's been rejected constantly, not once or twice, constantly. Enough times that the rejection stops feeling like an event and starts feeling like weather. He's been told by multiple casting directors, in terms that weren't particularly gentle, that he should consider a different career. Specifically, that his jaw doesn't move right when he talks, that his eyes droop, that something about his face reads as damaged rather than interesting. He's working the door at a cinema just to pay rent, and he has a dog, a bull mastiff named Butkus. Big dog, loyal dog, the kind of dog that's been with you through enough bad years that he knows your schedule and your moods and probably understands more about your life than most of the humans in it. He sells the dog for $40, not because he wants to, because he has to, because $40 is food for another week and the alternative is going hungry. He stands outside the convenience store where he found the stranger willing to buy Butkus and watches his dog leave with someone else and walks back to his apartment. And then he sits down and he writes. He'd watched a Muhammad Ali fight, Chuck Wepner versus Ali, 1975. Wepner was nobody, a journeyman fighter from New Jersey who had absolutely no business being in the ring with Ali. He was not supposed to last. He was supposed to be a body in the ring with a legend, and somehow he kept standing. He even knocked Ali down. Then Ali punished him for it and stopped him in the 15th round. Wepner lost, obviously, but he lasted long enough to become a story. And something about that, the specific image of a man with no right to still be standing, who is somehow still standing, broke something open in this 29-year-old, sitting in front of a television in a cold apartment. He wrote for 3.5 days, didn't sleep properly, barely ate, finished the script in 86 hours. It was about a small-time boxer from Philadelphia who gets a shot at the heavyweight champion and has no business being there and goes the distance anyway. He called it Rocky, and then he tried to sell it. Every major studio in Hollywood passed, not a few, every single one, not because the story had no power, because the man who wrote it insisted on starring in it. That was the problem. They were interested in Rocky. They were not interested in Sylvester Stallone. Eventually, the offers came in. He was offered hundreds of thousands of dollars for the script, money that would have changed his life overnight, money that, from a cold apartment with $106 and no dog, must have felt almost theoretical in its size. And there was one condition. He couldn't play the lead. They wanted a real star, Ryan O'Neal, James Caan, Burt Reynolds, someone whose name meant something. And Sylvester Stallone, broke, unknown, living in a cold apartment with $106 and no dog, said no. I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is the part of the story that's almost too strange to be true. He said no, not from a position of strength, not because he had options, because he had written a story about a man who refuses to accept that he doesn't belong in the room, and he wasn't willing to sell that story while proving he didn't believe it. United Artists eventually agreed. Budget, $1 million. Shooting time, 28 days. Sylvester Stallone, the lead. And with the money from the deal, the first thing he did was go back to that convenience store and find the man who'd bought his dog. The man didn't want to sell. He'd gotten attached to Butkus. Stallone paid $15,000 to get his dog back. The same dog, 3 weeks later, $40 out, $15,000 back. Rocky was released in November 1976. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards. It won 3, including Best Picture. And Butkus, the bull mastiff, appears in the film. Stallone insisted, "The dog is in Rocky. The dog is in Rocky too, because some things you don't leave behind." Now, I told you that story because I think it's the clearest illustration of something that gets said in a way that's true, and also in a way that's not quite honest enough. Failure is a privilege. That's true. The people who can fail, dust themselves off, and try again are the people with a cushion, time, money, family support, a job they can go back to, a safety net that exists even when they pretend it doesn't. When Steve Jobs got fired from Apple, he had experience, connections, capital. He started Pixar, he started Next, he eventually went back to Apple and turned it into the most valuable company on earth. And that story is inspiring. And also, he had options that most people don't have. When Mark Zuckerberg tells you the greatest successes come from the freedom to fail, he's right. And also, he had a Harvard network, early investment, and a family who wasn't depending on him not to fail. The freedom to fail is a privilege. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But here's where I want to push back on the framing, because I think the failure is a privilege argument, as true as it is, can become its own comfortable story. It can become a reason to not try. I can't afford to fail, therefore I can't afford to start. Therefore I wait until the conditions are better, until the safety net appears, until someone gives me permission. And that wait has no natural endpoint, because the conditions don't automatically get better. The safety net doesn't appear by waiting for it, and permission doesn't come from the outside. Stallone didn't have the privilege of safe failure. He had $106 and no dog, and he tried anyway, not because it was safe, because the alternative, the life he'd be living if he didn't try, was already a kind of failure, just a slower, quieter one, the kind that doesn't feel like failure because it never officially starts. And this is the distinction I think matters most. There are 2 kinds of failure. The kind that happens when you try something and it doesn't work, and the kind that happens when you never try at all. The first kind is visible. It has a name, a date, a story. You can point to it, learn from it, eventually, not immediately, but eventually, make some kind of sense of it. The second kind is invisible. It has no name, no date, no story. It's just the shape of a life that stayed inside its own walls and called that safety. And the brutal thing, the truly brutal thing, is that the second kind is the one people almost never recover from. Not because it destroys you, because it doesn't. It just continues, quietly, year after year. The question you don't ask, the thing you don't start, the version of yourself you never quite became. So yes, failure is a privilege for the people who have the resources to absorb it. That's true. And if you have those resources, even partially, even imperfectly, and you're still not starting, the problem isn't the risk. The problem is the story you're telling yourself about the risk. And if you genuinely don't have those resources, if failure, for you, really would mean the end of something important, then I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It isn't. But I'll tell you what Stallone's story actually says. Not take risks because they pay off. Not bet on yourself because it works out. It says something more uncomfortable than that. It says, the cost of not trying is also enormous. It's just paid in a currency that's harder to count, in years, in mornings where you wonder, in the specific weight of a life that was always about to start and somehow never quite did. He sold his dog for $40. He got him back for $15,000. And that dog is in the film, not as a footnote, not as a cute detail in a Wikipedia article. As a choice, Stallone insisted on it not because it made the film better, but because Butkus was there for the bad years, and he wasn't willing to tell the story of getting out of them without the one witness who actually saw it. That's not a metaphor, that's just what happened. But it does say something about what we owe to the parts of our lives that survived the worst version of us, and what it looks like to actually believe in the thing you're building enough to carry everything with you when you finally get the chance to build it. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Not, are you willing to fail? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what is the cost of not starting? Not in the abstract. For you, specifically, the thing you keep meaning to try, the version of your life you keep putting off until conditions improve. What does another year of not starting actually cost you? Because failure has a price. But so does waiting, and one of those shows up in the analytics. The other one shows up at 3 a.m. 30 years from now, wondering what would have happened if you'd started when you had the chance.